Hey guys, you're back in the garage with TheEZGZ. I always start my videos that way, right? Well, I'm going to shed a little light on this subject. I think you can see what I'm talking about. A little light on the subject. This is going to be the third set of headlights I've had on this car. The first ones were some little small tractor lights with a single beam, very inefficient at night if you really got in a situation where you need them. But you know, I don't drive this car that much at night, but that, you know, is neither here nor there. It's still got to be on there to be street legal. I think what I want to do, if I'm going to use this roof setup, is I'm going to put maybe a light bar. That's kind of the LED light bars. They're kind of pricey, but I was thinking maybe a 20-inch one right above the windshield there would be really effective for any type of off-road. Or this smaller light is a high-low beam, and I'm going to incorporate, I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to move my turn signal up into the light. It came that way. I did not expect it. I think it was supposed to be a parking light, and I exchanged the clear bulbs, 5-watt bulbs, for these amber ones, and I'm going to see how that looks as a turn signal. It might be very confusing at night. I'm not sure how all this is going to work out. You know, technically you can still use your arms for turn signals, but I just don't want to get in a situation with the police, and I want to clean this up. I'm going to use some trailer wire. I just used some wire loom. I got some of this 16/6 trailer wire, and this stuff is actually pretty small. I don't think it's 14. It looks really small. It looks more like 16. So I'll solder those on and try to do a neat job on that. The wiring has to come out a separate hole here in the bottom. The ones that are on there were kind of nice in that they used the bolt stem is hollow, and I was able to just run it straight off the bottom, and pretty inconspicuous. But now I'm gonna have to figure out a different way of doing this. I hate like heck to drill a hole, and if I change my mind again or this doesn't work out, I think what I'll do is wire them up on the outside and then decide if I want to actually make a hole down in here. I never liked the way the big one was actually touching on the gas cap. I used the stock hole and setup that was designed into this fiberglass car, so it didn't give me a lot of options to have it right. But I'm really looking forward to taking these turn signals off, and I got some cheesy little off-road lights. I got some different lights I could put down there, but I may just come up with a completely different bumper setup. I haven't decided yet, and that's the fun thing about having these cars. You're always changing them, and maybe someday I'll put a light bar up above. I just thought of something, as I often do about the time you get into a project. This headlight bezel base, I guess the bezel will be the other side. It did come with a rubber grommet. I did have to take it out because the bundle of wires wouldn't fit through there. This is like 6/16 wire, which appears to be the same size as what's on here, even though it's not marked. And I ended up with an extra wire. This is the trailer wire, and I like to use this wire. Stranded wire is really good. I'm using wire nuts. And I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you solder it and use some shrink tube? I don't know how permanent this is going to be, and when you're going stranded to stranded and you get a good secure nut, make sure that you don't lose the little metal cone that's inside there. I had 2 of them that were missing. I don't know why, but this is something that a friend of mine that worked at IBM taught me years and years ago. I hope he's watching this. On the inside, just in case somebody yanks or pulls on this, I've got it well into the sleeve. That's a better word. And I'm going to cut the end of it off right now. But you want to make sure that you get something on there. Get it bigger than the hole. Get it good and tight. So that if somebody, you might even want to put 2 of them on there, so that it can't accidentally get yanked into the hole and short out these wires and so on and so forth. Now I'm going to drop it in the hole. I'm going to assemble the light. This time, for a change, I was able to match all the colors except white. White I'm going to have to use as a yellow, and I could have probably, if there was such a thing, I probably could have gotten by with a 4 strands, because you've got a ground here, and then one of my indicators is going to end up being a ground as well. But this way I'm going to do all my connections someplace else underneath on the frame. Here's what the finished product's looking like. On this side I got a nice, you know, when I go to put gas in the car, I've got a space there, and I'm pleased about that. The lights aren't quite as bright as I thought they were going to be. It's actually, I don't know what they used. It was supposed to be a high-low beam. It was advertised as a 55-watt high-low beam, but the low beam is might as well not have anything. And I'm going to be using that. The turn signal indicator is awesome. I don't have it any power going to anything yet, so can't show you that. But this really cleaned up. I had a rat's nest right there, and I did not like that. And now I'm moving my rat's nest. My wire, and I had this with cars and buggies before, where you have to, if you wanted to lift the body off, it's just a nightmare, because all the wires were there, and I had a stock steering column that somebody had spliced into the wiring when it was just bad. So what I'm going to do is use a terminal strip. Somebody commented on one of my old videos, doesn't anybody use terminal strips anymore? So that's what I'm going to do. This loom covers the wires that come from my dashboard, and I'm actually going under the body, and my dashboard separates from the frame. I'll show you that in just a second. But for right now, what I'm going to do, I was trying to decide whether to put this inside, up here. This is a spot where it can get splashed and so on and so forth. I may end up taking a piece of tubing or radiator hose or something like that and make myself a little cover. I kind of enjoy being creative and figuring it out my own way. And the last setup was rather sloppy, but it lasted over 15 years, so much for that. And if I'm going to be taking this into the sand, I want it to be a little bit more robust, and I might want to I might want to throw an aluminum beam on here. I'm really debating on whether to go with aluminum beam and spindle mount wheels or disc brakes. I'm still toying with the idea of shedding some weight with this thing. We came in at 1,600 pounds just as the car sat, and that's with gas in both tanks and ready to roll. And I would like to get the weight down. I need to shake off
500 pounds, so I guess I need to go on a diet to begin with. That would be an easy 25 pounds maybe, huh? And but every little bit helps, and you would know that if you had one of these dune buggies when we're off-roading and had difficulty going up a hill or a dune, and asked your passenger to step out and then tried it again and went right up. And I've had that scenario more than once. So the next thing here is to, you can see how this came out in the fender. So it's going to be waterproof as much as it needs to be, and I'll tie it here. This is kind of an interesting frame. This is just a flat frame. There's nothing supportive, but it is a shorter wheelbase, so you're going to get less flexing. And this, I marked all my wires that I took off, but I'm probably going to end up having to get in there and trace it out. 15 years is a long time. I'm glad to get my turn signals off this front bar, and I just had these old lights. I don't think I'll use them, but I just kind of was daydreaming, and I'm a very visual person. I need to do things like that. And here's my wires. I'm gonna tie wrap that to this part of the frame, and then this one will go in there, and I will probably bring both these headlights down from the top on these, land them on these top terminals, and then it's pretty simple to run these up to the bottom terminals. And I'm going to have multiples going to the ground. See, I'm going to have a brown 4 wires. So I'm not sure. I'm going to have some extra terminals here. This was from Radio Shack. It's just the way I bought it, and I think it's going to work out pretty good. I guess we're going to find out. So yeah, just kind of a little updates here. I know this is going to turn into a long video, but you wouldn't believe how many times I make videos and just trash them all, start over. So I told you I'd show you how I did this. If you look from the top here, 1, 2, 3 screws are holding that aluminum angle up there, and that is where everything sets. So loosen my steering wheel, loosen those 3 bolts, lay that on the floor, and this body, the way I set it up, unbolt this tube frame. This cage will lift right out, then the body will lift off, and I've never had to do it, but I remember with my last car it came up and it was an extreme struggle. So this car is lifted, and you can see it right here. The actual frame is this piece on the bottom, and then I took another 2-inch square stock and I put it on top, and that way it pinched and gave support all the way along the bottom for these side panels, full length. And the reason I needed to do that is because my air cleaners were going to be touching. I needed space for my air cleaners on the dual carb with this Berrien body style. It sort of occurred to me that, you know, I got a lot of younger viewers and people that don't have a lot of experience. So I'm not saying this is the bottom line. I'm not an authority on it. I can remember when they used to bring these trailers to our junior high school. There was one with Briggs & Stratton engines, and we went through them, took them apart, discussed how they operated, took tests, put them back together, and started them. We had an electrical trailer and a welding trailer, and that's the way I learned. I mean, it was part of our curriculum in school, and I think it's great, and it's just too bad that they don't teach that stuff in schools now. So I'm trying to fill in some of that space. Most of your books, here's a owner's handbook, just some old, a climber's book, an old one, and it'll give you a clue as to how your wiring diagram is, and they're going to be different for different vehicles. So, but they're so similar. If you've got one of these, you can figure out a lot. This one happens to have a generator on it, and it's using an old regulator. And There's nothing the matter with a generator. Everybody seems to go to the alternator. They got big stereo system. They're using more electricity. The later model generators, before they switched to alternators, were something like 380 watts, and a turn signal bulb is like 5 watts. These headlights are 55 watts. They're one of the big drawing things on a car, that and the starting motor. So I want to show you a few tools and a few techniques that I've used over the years, and I'm constantly learning and updating and changing things. I was in the construction field as well as working for the phone company, and in the HVA industry we're always working with electrical. So there's a lot of ways you can connect a wire. I'm using a small Radio Shack terminal strip because I got a lot of wires and I don't have a lot of space. This was out of some type of HVAC equipment, and as you can see, it's a lot larger and it probably had a lot more amperage going to it, but you know, it just depends. Here's a, I'm going to just throw this stuff off to the side. Here's a fuse block that came in my desert race car, and I took it out. You put your hot lead here, that energizes one side of all these fuses, and as you can see, they use different size fuses and different gauge wire, and then you've got your push-on connectors on the side. This is a pretty cool one, but what do you see here? This was inside of a box that was sealed up on the back of the car, and you've got a lot of dirt there. You've got, when you have dirt and moisture, you get corrosion, and you can have problems with connections. I don't use fuses on my cars that I build. I know that sounds dumb. I figure everything's accessible and my whole system is a fusible link. I'll use like a 30 amp circuit breaker right off the battery, but that's about it. So yeah, I don't want to be stalled or stuck anyplace. This is a neat little fuse block. Someday I may use it on a different application, but all this stuff is available. Here's something that's a little bit bigger and, you know, bigger wire, more current. You run different size wire. They size wire according to the load, and you really need to get a book to figure out what's there. Most of the time you're dealing with something that has wire on it, and it will be written on the side of the wire what the gauge is, whether it's stranded or solid. On automobiles, stranded wire seems to be more prevalent because of the vibration, and you're using DC voltage. On here's another way of connecting two wires, and here's another view of it. Basically, you got an insulating block, and you've got it's holding a solid chunk of steel, and then you've got a set screw, and you put your wires in either side and take them in and out. Now, the reason you want to do that, or the reason you could do it, speed of assembly. A lot of times in manufacturing, they'll have, like in this case, it was be a control box in a panel, and they pre-wire it at the factory. Then when you field wire it, you might tie in different accessories, and so it'll have wires going to one side, it'll have a diagram telling what it's for, or you can trace it out, and then you're going to remotely put in on the job site what goes into the other side. I've seen these little ones. This is something that they used to sell at Radio Shack that's real small, but look at how big of a wire you can put in it. You're using this, and you can just take a hacksaw and cut this into smaller pieces. I like to use them in like a 4-inch block, and if you've got a hot and a ground, you can run them through there to attach two wires together. There's always soldering, but this makes it removable and accessible, and sometimes it's more convenient. On some wires, on solid core house wires, they usually use these twist locks, and make sure that the wire is in there. I have I had this thing twist locked my headlights on there for 15 years and I never had any problem with it. And I just decided that I wasn't going to do that. Actually, I did take 2 stranded wires. What you want to watch out for is when you have a solid wire and a stranded wire. This probably isn't the preferred way of doing it, although you're going to see it done from time to time. So inside my headlight buckets, I did do that with the strands of wire. There was a plug-in connector, but I didn't want to tamper with the little short wires that they gave me, and I didn't want wires and connections out here where it could get water on it. So away with that. Here's some of the little crimp connectors. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, jumping around here. You can get these little boxes. They used to sell these, I think at Radio Shack too, project boxes. And I could have drilled a hole in the sides and made a nice little inlet and outlet and screwed my terminal strip to the back of that. But to me, this is more of a struggle. What I probably would have done with this, and what I bought it for, was to put toggle switches and indicator lights for the minimum controls on a sand rail. Works just fine. This was what that terminal strip created. They call it an 8-position dual row barrier strip, and lets you access wiring without disturbing the circuit, help prevent short circuits. 20 amp wire sizes, 22 to 12 and smaller. So 22 is really small. 12 is pretty good size. Now I want to talk about a little bit about the different tools that I've collected over the years. Here's an assortment pack of different type of connectors. You can get eyes and spades and push on, male, female, all kinds of things. And these are handy to have with you if you're going on a trip or someplace far away from home. If you do have a lot of electrical, so you can do some emergency repairs or help somebody else out with their stuff. It's much more economical to buy them in a larger quantity like this. This was a lot bigger box. It costs a little bit more, but when you go and buy these packages that are just 2 and 3 to package, they just nail you on that stuff. Like at Ace Hardware and stuff, you get like 5 of these for $3 or something. It's crazy. Maybe even more than that, I don't know. Some of the tools that you'll need, I think this is probably, I remember this wire stripper. I have a scar right here at where the tip of my thumb is. I don't know if you can see it there. There's a scar. I got this when I was in my 20s. I went to work at a hospital in their maintenance department, and it has these bolt cutters on it here for electrical boards, 1032, 832. I wanted to try it out, and I bought these things, and I screwed the bolt through there, and I was squeezing down, and I was using 2 hands, and I actually used the wire cutter. My flesh got in the way. Boy, I bled like a stuck pig. That's pretty funny. These are my least preferred. They are Klein. Klein is a brand name that you'll see in most electricians' tool pouches and guys that do control work. Klein tools are really top-notch. You'll pay a little bit more for them, but they are certainly worth it. And this is a wire stripper, bolt cutter, wire cutter, a crimper, and it tells you what size wires that you should do and which size holes. It's worn off here, but they had like blue and red and yellow. All this stuff is kind of color coded. Yellow being the biggest, red being the smallest, blue being right there in the middle. I'm not going to give you the wire sizes and stuff. This isn't that detailed. Years and years ago, they used tape. They used a lot of tape. I have this old roll of cloth tape, and they still have places that you can use something like this. Friction tape, cloth tape. This is a gooey mess. On an electric motor, sometimes you really need to heavily insulate them, and you can use layers of tape. say on one of those big 120 volt motors, 120 horsepower motors, pump motors, you don't use most of these type of connectors. You use brass lugs and you use bolts, and you bolt them together, and then you have to tape them. They're usually three-phase, 480 volts, and there's a lot of amperage and a lot of heat going through, and you really need to insulate them. After you use the cloth tape, you'd put on the plastic type tape that is pretty popular here, and a lot of people still use this. It's an insulator. You can, you know, tape things together. You can bundle wires. It stretches. It is going to expand and contract with the heat, which is something that always happens with electrical, or anytime you're running electricity through a wire, you get a thermal load. Here's a Gerber Multitool, and this right here in the handle, I believe, is a crimping tool. And of course, cutters are good. You want a good sharp set, and it looks like there's a little hole there to help you with stripping some wire. Although when you start stripping wires with these types of tools, you're probably going to put a nick in the copper wire, or you're going to cut a few strands if it's small stranded wire, and you need to be really super careful when you're just using cutters. But if you just say, I need 15 feet of this cable, and you want to cut it, it's great for that type of thing. For roughing things in, just roughing it out. That's what they would call that. One of my favorite type of tools for stripping wire is this, and I believe it's is this a Klein? Ideal is what it's called. Huh. Everybody makes them, different companies, but I can go pretty quick with these and do a pretty good job, and it's easy to hold, and they're sharp, and I like it a lot more than I ever like these. So just telling you that. These tools are really slick. These are little strippers, and I'm going to show you how that works. This is a crimping tool to crimp an end on a wire, and I'm going to show you how to do that. It has a nice little cutter. You can see it's pretty big, so you get a lot of leverage. And for crying out loud, when you're crimping connectors on the end of a wire, I see some guys, you'd swear they were working on a flywheel nut on a Volkswagen. You don't have to just smash these things to pieces. You're distorting everything. Let me put you on a stand here. I'm going to just let you see this thing function. There's a piece of wire in there. But it grabs a wire, cuts it, and then pulls it away. If you're going to do a lot of work like this, man, this is tedious, and you can just get right in there, and these things are great. Different kinds, does the same thing. I had a plastic one that I got at AutoZone or something one time. It works great too. It won't last as long as a better quality one, but it works great. Other tools that you need are good screwdrivers and maybe a nut driver for different things. And when you're stripping the overall covering off, I like to just pinch it down like this, and then just take my knife and go across. So let me put you in a stand here, and I'm actually going to do a little bit here in front of you. Probably be a joke, but let's try. It's going to be crazy to do this on camera because I'm not sure whether to look at the viewfinder or not. I'll probably cut myself. But just as an example, you pinch your wire like this, and I remember working with an electrician one time who worked in a nuclear facility, government facility, and they said they were so picky about not nicking the copper wire. So there's a little insulator underneath the skin, and if you pinch it, all you got to do is just sort of cut this top, and it'll kind of like split on its own. But don't go too deep where you cut through the individual insulation on the wires. This would be like watching paint dry to
to do a whole video. I've been goofing around with this wiring all day long. So once you get it started like that, then you can just pull it off, and there's this white wire, this white piece of cloth. It's kind of like a rope to help you pull it if you're pulling it through pipe. Just give it a little strength so you're not stretching on the wires. Now, I'm just gonna put this on the end of the block. You get to seeing how to use these things after a while, but isn't that cool? It just one step, real quick, easy on your patience, and that's about all you need when you're doing these crimp connectors. Let me just put one on here. When you got this small stranded wire, you always want to twist it. Always twist stranded wire. It keeps these little straight ends from taking off and touching things that you don't want them to touch. So what I always do is I want that insulator over it. You could take this blue thing off and slide it on the wire, and then put your wire inside, crimp it, and solder it. I actually did that one time, but the whole idea of this stuff is to speed it up. Now, these are my preferred crimping tool, and what I do, you can see the little tit, and there's a little trough, and this works on a lot of different sizes, and I'm just going to pinch it. I'm not getting crazy with it. I'm not just smashing it. And then I always try to pull it off. But you don't have to smash it so hard. Sometimes you see guys where they break the plastic, and it's like, that's not necessary. You also have that other style, and it does something similar. So you just find the color of the one you want, and you've got the little crimping devices right there. You can go completely on the outside, over the top. I'm not going to waste another crimp, but you just squeeze it down. You don't have to make contact, but you do want it to smash it into the wire so that it's good and tight. Good and tight. You know what that is? That's like, if you've been around Volkswagens a while, good and tight. So anyhow, I hope that helps somebody, gives up somebody some ideas on some options that they have. You don't just have to, and look at the car that you're tearing apart. You know, a lot of times we have to get parts off of cars, and you can use the stuff that's in there. The fuse blocks and things that come on a standard Volkswagen. Reuse as much of that factory stuff you can, and pay attention to what size wire that the factory used it. That's where it can get you expensive too. If you just go into some place like O'Reilly's and you go in their electrical department, wire starts getting expensive. And what a lot of guys have a tendency to do is they'll buy a big spool of one kind of wire, one color, black or white or whatever it is that they like or have around, or they have something left over from another job. Or you go to the job site, and when you're in commercial applications, you'll always see scraps of stuff that the electricians just throw away. And it's worth it to pick up that stuff and hang on to it for future projects. That way you'll have all this clutter around your garage like mine. But it is good to have, and it is good to use colored wires. If you take it one wire at a time, it's not that hard to figure out. When you look at the whole job as a whole, it is kind of scary. And that can really confuse you and aggravate you if you're in the field later and have a problem and somebody's trying to help you, or the light isn't good and you're trying to decipher something so you can get home or back to camp. It's very frustrating. I just keep in mind, you don't need a lot of accessories. All you need is a jumper wire to get from that coil to that hot side of your starting motor, and you can push start the car if you got it on there like that, and at least, you know, get back to camp under your own power, follow somebody else or something. So at any rate, hope that helps somebody. While I think of it, I wanted to make another comment too.
A lot of you guys watching YouTube and just getting started, you see everybody with fancy tools, and you probably don't have the money, or know anybody that has the tools that they can loan you, or you can maybe work in their shop. But when there's a will, there's a way. I didn't always have this stuff either. It's taken me a lot of years, a lot of decades to gather this stuff. And you just, if you're inclined to do this kind of work and in this kind of hobby and have an interest here, it's a wonderful way to pass the time. It's good, clean fun. You have the potential to possibly earn some money. Everything, to be good at it, takes practice, and nobody knows everything. And there's a lot of great YouTubers out here that do a lot of fantastic work. You're gonna use electrical, even if you work on computers. It's just good stuff to learn and know and develop some skills and practices, and you just do what you can with what you have. You might not be able to do it what you want the first time around, but if you can get the results you need or want and be safe about it, like me, I put this together 15 years ago, and now I've had a change of heart on how I want things. I want things a little bit different. Sometimes we don't. It's a prototype. This is a kit car. I mean, this is a whole different situation, and it depends on whether your car is sitting outside or garaged. If it's going to be out in the weather, it's going to be hard on everything, especially electrical connectors. And for this go around, to try out these lights and this new setup, I'm just going to use this strip. It's going to be exposed to weather, but I don't drive this car. It doesn't have a top and doors and roll-up windows. I don't drive this thing in extreme weather conditions year-round and in the snow and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not one of these guys that looks for mud puddles. There's some guys that just love the mud, and they just love crashing through it and getting in it and stirring things up. I may come up with some sort of split a piece of hose or something and make a little cover for this, just to keep a lot of stuff on it, but off of it. But I think you get the gist of what I'm saying, and I don't get discouraged, and just do the best you can. I'm still learning all the time. There's always better ways of doing things, and you just do the best you can with what you've got at the time that you're doing it. And I just want to be supportive of you guys, and don't be afraid to try. We all fail. We all fail miserably. I've failed thousands of times, and we'll probably fail thousands more. That's part of life. And how you cope with failure, I've worked with guys that just have short tempers, and it must be something else going on in their life. They're throwing tools and stomping their feet and slamming doors when things don't go their way, or something gets broken. And a lot of times the trades have to work together, and one trade will come in and accidentally mess up something that's your work, or something that you have, or somebody will change their mind. Oh, that's always a big one too. Middle of a job, they run out of money and they want you to start taking shortcuts and doing things different than you planned. And sometimes you're just forced to do things, or there's a timeline there that you're forced to do things less than what you would normally want to do. And that's okay. You just got to do what you got to do. And I guess that's all I got to say on that topic. But don't give up. Try. Get out there and try. Head out and have some fun. But wait! There's more!
I need a burrito. That's what I need.